Welcome back, Flyers Nitty Gritty fans, to Getting Gritty with It with your host, Yariv. Wolok. My partner in crime, Vasili Gianarakos, is not here today. He had another work engagement, so my love to him. But we do have an awesome guest today. I'm super excited to welcome back to the show the voice of the Flyers, Jim Jackson. Welcome back.
How are you, my friend?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Doing well. I'm enjoying the summer. I get to golf now and swim and go on vacations and do all the things normal people do in the summer now that I'm not doing the Phillies anymore. And I'm kind of loving it. So I think it might extend my Flyers career, actually.
Oh, interesting.
Recovery. Doing both sports. Yeah, doing both sports, I was starting to feel a little worn down. So thinking, I'm getting there. Look at Mark Zumoff retired. Steve Coates retired. My producer, Ryan Cooper, retired. Zach Hill, the PR guy, par excellence with the Flyers, retired. These are all people that either I worked with, or like Zach. In Zach's case, we started the same day with the Flyers. So, you just do the math, and it seems like it's getting to be that time. But and I was starting to feel like maybe 2 or 3 years. But now I get to do what I will do in retirement in the summer, so I don't have that need necessarily. I get to recharge, and I'm ready to go. I mean, I will say I'm ready as we're sitting here in mid-August. I'm ready. I'm ready for hockey, but still, I've enjoyed the summer for sure.
I love that. And I'll say this, please don't retire. I would
have
hate
to
it.
Eventually. Yeah, and they may retire me. I mean, it might not be my call. So
I'll be out there with picket signs, protesting. Please don't.
That, but if it's gotten to that point, I would hope I would realize it was time to retire. So we'll see. I kind of want to get the Flyers back to consistent contention before I step away. But then you say that, and it's like, why would you leave if they're in contention? I guess maybe I want to see them back up to the top of the mountain, or at least close to it. I'm not saying I'll wait until they win the cup, but get back into relevance toward a Stanley Cup. And then as I start to see the signs that it might be going the other way, okay, time to say goodbye.
I love that. But and I'll say this though, I'm only 36 years old, so I'm not going to talk like I fully understand that part of my life. But as I do get older, you start thinking about the rest of your life, the time that you have. I don't blame you for wanting to do that retirement stuff. And, life gets grueling. You start thinking about, well, what am I doing with every day? I'm sure you love what you're doing, but you want to feel like you're enjoying and living your life too. And you start thinking about that as you get older. So
yeah, also the bucket list is real. You start thinking, one of the things on my bucket list, believe it or not, was to see a Bruce Springsteen concert.
Oh no,
I've never ever seen him. It's like I've always been working, or and I love him. I'm not like a diehard, but I really like his work. And his concert just got postponed, and it'll probably be moved into like October, right when I'm busy and I can't go. But I have even bigger things, the travel wise and so forth on my bucket list. And I think that the most sobering thing is when I start looking at those in memoriams, like on YouTube and so forth, and you start seeing the ages of the people, and it's like, yeah, I'm like getting closer to that age than I'm comfortable with. So it's time to while I can do some of those things. But as I said, now with my summers off, 4 months basically off in the summer, maybe when the Flyers get better, that'll be 3 or 2.5. But right now it's been a solid 4 months off, and I'm getting the trips in with my family, and I'm getting to golf and swim, and I'm doing obviously the broadcast coaching still, and I'm also doing some voiceover work. So I'm doing all these things I really like to do that I probably would do and will do in retirement. So there's not as much of a need to get to that, since I can spend a third of the year basically doing it right now. So it has definitely led me to believe that if it's up to me, and again, that's no given, but if it's up to me, I'll have a bit of a longer run here than I thought I was going to have, let's say 2 years ago or 3 years ago.
I love that, because I do remember back where I did that podcast with you, the Always Level Up. We did talk about some of where you wanted to go with your career. So it's awesome to see 2 years later that you sound kind of rejuvenated, almost like the team itself. I'll be honest with you.
There's no doubt that helps too.
Yeah.
Nothing more energizing as a fan, and I guess as a broadcaster, we are fans of the team. Obviously, we're watching them every day. We do have an allegiance to them. Hopefully, we keep that allegiance in the professional level when we're on the air. But the bottom line is we want this team to do well. And there's nothing more energizing for that fan base than people that support the team than a team that's young and growing and improving. And I think we're really headed in that direction. And, for the last 2 or 3 years, it hasn't been that it's been awful, because what I do for a living, as I've told you many times, when my feet hit the ground in the morning and I have a hockey game to do or a baseball game or any kind of sporting event to call, it's a good day for me. I do not ever think of my life in terms of my work life as torture, and certainly not my personal life either. But I mean, it basically, this is a relative statement here, but the last 3 years haven't been fun for the fan base. And I think a big part of that really, Arf, is that we didn't know exactly what direction the team was going in. Chuck Fletcher, who I have a lot of respect for, is a great human being, and obviously did not have a great run here. If he had a mistake, and if it's something that maybe he would want to do back, it would be his messaging, because I think at times they were saying, an aggressive retool. At times they were saying we're definitely sellers, and then they wouldn't sell. We're going for it this year, and then they wouldn't quite really go for it. You can't really do that. You have to get the fans on board with what you're doing. And we know in Philadelphia, I mean, they went through god awful stuff with the Sixers. The Philadelphia sports fans will hang with you if they know where you're going. And we now, with what Jonesy and Danny are doing, know where this team is going, what the path is. And it's an exciting path. And the good thing about it is everyone's talking about this deep rebuild. The rebuild started like 2 years ago, and definitely at least last year. So it's not like they're having to go back down right to the bottom, right to the nubs, right to and start over. No, you've already got Owen Tippett, Noah Cates, Joel Farabee, Cam York. I had a list of you. Already got a lot of good young players here. You have a couple more maybe that are going to join this year, and then you have at least 2 studs that are out there joining in the years to come, and maybe 3 or 4. So, yeah, the future's bright, and that's exciting. So, yeah, I guess I'm rejuvenated. I think the fan base is rejuvenated, and I think that's the main reason why.
Yeah, I want to touch on something you just said too. The nuance of the messaging that Fletcher had here. I do think that was part of his biggest problem. And some of the things that I've been talking about this podcast for a while, like even listening to Danny, and I've loved what Danny and Keith have done so far. But I do listen to that whole rebuild thing. I'll be honest with you, at least I don't know if my entire audience agrees with me. But I don't really buy the rebuilding, retooling statement, either one of them. I don't really care about that stuff. I don't even think about that. The way I kind of look at it is you really don't have that many options. It's not like the Flyers had an endless array of options of things to do. It's more of just accepting your actual position and then making moves that are optimal for your actual position, where I think Fletcher was a little bit fighting it, right? Like maybe even this past year, if he just didn't do some of these resignings and go out and get D'Angelo and give up a few extra assets, it just sets you back a little bit more and a little bit more with each one of these moves, where it really should have just been like, okay, these little incremental moves, they are doing something, but it's not really enough. And now I'm kind of just digging this hole deeper. It really was, we were always kind of in a position where we had to retool for a little bit here, and it's kind of we just delaying it, right? Like we knew that the team wasn't. It's not like the team is completely devoid of talent. Everybody wants to, behave like that at times, but that's not really the case here. Like you said, this rebuild didn't start. It's not empty. This isn't what Ron Hextall got. Right. He didn't. It's not an utter disaster. Fletcher didn't do it with complete utter incompetence or something. Like people kind of behaved that way afterwards, but it was really more. He just didn't kind of. He's kind of saying, "Oh, aggressive retool, rebuild." He didn't. I don't think he should have said any of that stuff. I think he should have just take a season off, kind of sit back quietly, and then going back through it. And I think that's kind of what Danny's doing. It's like a silent aggression. I'm going to be not aggressive in a certain way so I can be really aggressive in the ways I need to be in about 12, 24 months. Because people are saying 3-5 years. I'm like, reevaluate every year, right?
I couldn't agree with you more. There's a lot of people I really respect who cover the Flyers, who are talking about this. they don't need Carter Hart because he's too old for the rebuild. He's 25 as a goalie. Are you kidding me? What are we talking about? A 7-year rebuild here? Goalies at 30 are still quite relevant. So that's 5 years from now. And I know there's other issues with Carter right now, but I'm just talking about the trade talk with Carter. I completely agree with you. And in Chuck's defense, there aren't many general managers who lost their best two-way forward for almost 2 full seasons. And I would say their best defenseman, because I'm not the one that thought that Ivan Provorov was a number one. So Ryan Ellis, to me, that trade not working out to the fact that he played 4 games with the team was a humongous setback. And then on top of that, 2 years ago, you had your number 2 center, in addition to Couturier. Number 2 center Hayes was a shell of himself due to injury. So the injuries really hurt him. Mm-hmm. I think it's how they reacted to the injuries and how they reacted to Matt Niskanen's retirement that really got them into trouble, because they never could replace Niskanen. Many failed attempts. One was Ellis with an injury. I can't lay that one on him, but I can certainly lay Eric Gustafson on him and Tony DeAngelo and some of the other moves. So, he overpaid probably for Rasmus Ristolainen, who's turning into a decent player, but still he gave up, if you count the Ghost trade, because really they traded Ghost to kind of make room for Risto. They got really like 5 picks for Risto. As good as he is going to be now, I think, as a solid second pair defenseman. I don't know if he's worth that much, right? So they really had trouble with the defense with some of the moves they made. But as you say, that still leaves, if Couturier comes back this year and if Atkinson comes back this year, that's like 2 free agent pickups of 2 really good veteran forwards, one of the best two-way veteran forwards in the league. Now, is he still what he was? That's a legitimate question. But if those 2 are 80 to 85% of what they were, and you put them into the mix of young players who are bound to take, some of them at least, not all, another step. Owen Tippett may take another step. I think Noah Cates will take another step offensively. I think his defensive game is already top notch. I think you're looking at Joel Farabee with a full off season of working out, being stronger and having a much improved season. And then Cam York's going to get much more responsive. I mean, I can go down the list. There's a lot of young players here, right, that we're talking about. And then throw on top of that maybe a Tyson Forster emerging, or maybe even Emil Andre, who at development camp to me looked out of his league in the development camp. He's beyond, to me, a far-off prospect. I think he's somebody they have to really look hard at this year, because, and I hate doing this, but I don't like doing this, but every time I watch him play, it just jumps Kimmo Timonen at me. Yeah. So, those 2 could add to the mix. And if Carter Hart does play the season and, with all the other stuff, you can't tell me that team can't contend for a playoff spot. I'm not talking about the cup, but at least contend for a playoff spot this year. There's a lot of ifs. I understand that. And they have to have Couturier as part of that. If Coots comes back and is injured, no. And then that changes everything too for the trade deadline. And that's where we're different now. Whereas under Chuck, we would have gone into the trade deadline this year, and let's say Couturier gets injured, and some of the young guys don't, and they're way out of it. They're going to move some people to bring in more assets, because that's their big plan. That is the plan. It's for the future. Now, if Couturier plays well and Atkinson comes back and plays well, and some of these young guys do take another step up and they're contending at the trade deadline, I'm not saying they're going to go out and trade for a veteran, but I don't think they're going to sell. So I have confidence in these 2 guys and the overall management that they're going to know how to handle the situation now and not get caught kind of in between. And I think the fan base is in a let's see right now. I've read a lot of stuff about Danny Briere doesn't have the experience. Danny Briere did whatever he possibly could to prepare himself for this job outside of being a general manager for another team. Now, you could have gone out and got a former GM, and okay, they would have more experience than Danny. But Danny went down to the depths of the minor leagues and basically learned like a sponge and took in everything the organization has, from scouting to the minor leagues. And then the last couple of years, of course, with the big team in just about every way, business side and ice side, he was involved. So he prepared a really good player. I mean, an outstanding all-star caliber player, to just basically start over again like he did and do what he did to prepare himself for this job. He couldn't be more prepared outside of being a GM before. And Keith Jones, I've witnessed at firsthand The guy is as tied in with the NHL as anybody.
Mm-hmm.
We would go on the road, and Joe Sakic and Ken Holland and Jim Rutherford searched him out.
Yeah.
They found him in the media room to ask his opinions on players. He's eminently tied in. I think some people are afraid of him because they're listeners to a certain radio station where he was on the morning show. Well, that was a different shtick. And Keith Jones is very smart. He's a chameleon. He knows the audience. So he's not going to go on WIP and sound like the president of an NHL hockey team. But I can guarantee you, I'd sit there sometimes. We'd sit there watching a skate or watching a pregame skate even. And he'd say some things about players that, he knows the league. He's tied in. He's very, very well prepared to be in the position he's in. The Flyers are in good hands. That doesn't mean they're going to make all good moves. I think the first one, the Provorov trade, was an outstanding move. And then some of the others, they kind of just got rid of people. I think it's the subtraction John Tortorella was talking about to make sure the culture is going to be good around here, which is very important. And I think they succeeded in that. So I think their first off season was a good one.
Yeah, so let me dig into. I want to dig into a few of those points. It was awesome, but let's go back to Sean Couturier real quick. This is something I do want to talk about. When he got injured last year, if you were to listen to that episode, when we found out that he got injured, and I was on here, I pretty much went, "That's it, no playoffs." The reason I say that is I know everybody likes to say that the goalie is the most important position. I don't really believe that. I believe that there are three critical positions. You know them too: the goalie, the number one defenseman, number one center. But the way I see it is the number one center is not only a humongous element of your defense, but he's also a humongous element of your offense. You can kind of make the same case for number one defenseman, but I'd argue if you don't have a number one center who can match up against the best players in the league, and, God bless Noah Cates for what he did this past year, but a guy who can really play against top players, in my opinion, you don't have to be the best player in the league. You need to be able to play against the best players in the league. I see Sean Couturier as a huge impact player. It's been almost 2 years, I would say maybe already 2 years, since people have really seen him. And I feel like people in Philly kind of forgot that he was kind of, not only did he win a Selke, but he was playing at a level where he was in the upper echelon of the league, where he was considered one of the top players in the league. Do you believe that about him? Because the way I see it, I mean, statistically, with Sean Couturier and this team, not only do they score more, but they give up a lot less goals. And
they spend a lot less time in their own zone. Yeah, they spend a lot less time in their own zone. And that goes to the number one defenseman, which is obviously huge. That's an open-ended question right now in this team. Yeah. But I will say, as far as Coots goes, that no one wanted to play more last year. He was ready to play. They held him out. Am I happy they did? I don't know. In my opinion, I think it would have been good to get him in some games, but their fear was if he gets hurt in these meaningless games last year, what look does that have on it, I guess. But I think for him going into this year would have helped to get in 5-10 games just to feel a little bit better about it. But, because now he's going to have training camp and then preseason games, but nothing's like the regular season game, right? So really, in that game, whatever the date is there in mid-October when they play in Columbus, I mean, that's when he's going to finally be able to answer that question, but he's going to be a nervous wreck up until, and he wouldn't have had to have gone through that if he'd gotten some games in last year. But to your point, I go by what people say from other teams, other coaches, other players, scouts, and Couturier could not be more well regarded. He's basically, in most people's eyes, Patrice Bergeron light. He might not be light anymore because Patrice is retired and Coots is now in his 30s, but still has some good years left. And that he didn't play in the last 2 years. Maybe he has more good years than the normal 31-year-old. So, but the bottom line is, the question with him is going to be his back. As a healthy player, I completely believe in him. He's a Selke Trophy winner. The guy is a guy who can, you judge a hockey player, no matter the position outside of goalie, by whether you want to play him, if you're up a goal or down a goal. If you find a player that you want out there at both times, he's a great player. I remember people telling me they thought Ray Bourque was comparable to Bobby Orr because, you wanted Bobby Orr out there, certainly if you were down a goal. And maybe if you were up a goal, Ray Bourque, you wanted him out there for sure either way, right? And that's absolutely the case with Sean Couturier. You're down a goal, you want him out there. And if you're up a goal, you certainly want him out there. And to your point on Noah Cates, I mean, to think of what he did defensively last year, it was Couturier-like. He didn't produce the offensive numbers, but I mean, give me a break. The guy was thrown into a new position in his first full year in the NHL. I could see why toward the end of the year, you started to show some things offensively, and I think that's in him. So you could have a 1-2 there defensively, at least.
Same age though, Jim. 23 years old. What was Sean Couturier putting up in the NHL?
Yeah,
I mean, relatively comparable.
Yeah, he didn't really bust out until about age 25 year, I believe. Is his great first offensive
something like that.
And so yeah, I mean, what you said is absolutely true about a number one center. If you're talking a two-way number one center, I mean, there are some number one centers that are pure offense. Not as true in that case, because then you have to get another center out there against the other top line, and it makes it tough. With Sean Couturier, you don't have to worry about that if you're John Tortorella. You know, you want to score a goal, put him out there. You want to stop a goal, put him out there.
Doesn't that make the argument for him being a legitimate number one center then?
Yeah, there's no doubt he's the number one center. I mean,
I've heard it argued otherwise.
Coaches, players of other teams. I mean, it's just that he's absolutely a number one center. The question is he an all-star center? Yeah. And you know, his offensive numbers aren't going to ever get him to be an all-star because you got McDavid and you got all these guys with the ridiculous numbers out there. So, but if you go to coaches and say, who do you want on your team? I bet you if he's 100% Sean Couturier, and that's a big if, but he's absolutely in the top 10 to 15 centers in the league in terms of two-way play out of the pivot. So yeah, that's been a huge loss. And, you know, they also lost Ellis, who they were counting on to be another guy you'd want out there up a goal or down a goal. And, you know, I know he only played 4 games here, but the whole build of the team 3 years ago, was for him to be a big part of it, right? And he just disappeared. So, and not his fault. The booing of him on opening night last night
was ridiculous.
Really not one of our fans' higher moments. And it wasn't a large group, but when you boo, the boos really, you hear them. I mean, this guy's probably had his career end and they're booing. I mean, that was tough. But yeah, so they lose Couturier, they lose Ellis, they get nothing 2 years ago from Hayes. Yeah, I understand why the year went down the Timmy Farabee. There were so many injuries that year. Last year, not as many injuries, but still Couturier, Ellis. They never, you know, and they decided to go young. And they also brought in a coach who's put a whole new system in. So the system's in. Most of the players are going to be familiar with that and how Torts works. And there's certainly an adjustment period for that. But they all know that. And the sign that the management isn't thinking of this as a throwaway year. Why do they go out and get Mark Stahl? Why do they go out and get Garnet Hathaway? Why do they go out and get Ryan Poehling? You don't get those players unless you're trying to backfill, as Torch says, some of the other positions and have your young players hopefully take those top 6 or top 9 positions. The team could be competitive for sure. But as far as Couturier goes, absolutely a number one center if he's healthy. And again, big if. Guy hasn't played much the last 2 years, 2 back procedures. You know, it's iffy. Mark Stone's had 2. He won a Stanley Cup, played pretty well, and ended up scoring a hat trick with a fractured wrist, we found out today. But you know, it can be done, but we'll see. I mean, it's the big if. But you know, if we see him playing well early in the year, I think the narrative changes for this year. I think this team can be a contender for a playoff spot. And once you're in the playoffs, you never know. But again, I don't think even if that happens, that management's going to lose sight of the goal, which is still to build for the future. So I don't think you're going to see him get to the trade deadline and trade a first-round pick and one of our prospects for a 30-year-old, you know, player. I think you're going to see them maybe make some support moves that don't cost them any assets, or they just stay put. I don't think they'll sell. I don't think you're going to see them, if they're really close to a playoff spot, trading Travis Konechny, for instance. But if they're way out of it, that could be part of the mix, because TK is going to be a free agent coming up, you know, relatively soon, and he's going to demand a lot of money. And if you're not getting it done this year, that would probably mean that Couturier is not making it back. Maybe will he make it back? So this year can go one of 3 or 4 ways, but the range in the ways this season can go are pretty large, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's a great point. It really is. And the injuries, the inexperience and youth throughout the lineup, right? These X factors. I think, you know, to previous point that you were making, I think a lot of people, they want to have the narrative controlled. So like to make yourself feel better, you say, oh, they're going to be bad for the next 3-5 years. I know that already. I've already decided, but that's not really what this is. And this is what I've been talking about in this podcast, that everything is an iterative process. This whole thing will be an iterative process. The Flyers didn't throw.
I'm not sure if you use iterative with the fan base, they're going to quite.
Oh, they hate it. I'm sure. Only my audience cares. I promise you that much.
Oh, I know. I've been voicing audiobooks. I've been reading a lot of iterations of things, but I don't know as if all the fans out there know what that means. So
well, I say it anyway, but I bring it up that this is always going to be an annual thing, right? The Flyers aren't looking at this as, oh, this is an utter disaster. Let's ignore it for 3 years and just add.
They're not taking.
But it doesn't even work that way.
No, I
agree. Ignore your assets and hope that I think it's every year you try to make them a little bit better, right? So you have all these assets, you throw them out there, and then you evaluate and see. And if you have to pivot, you move assets. Like you were saying, it's got to be a fluid situation, especially where the team is today with the same overall goal that, you're not going to sway and make any of these crazy moves in the opposite direction that impede that overall goal. So I think all that makes a ton of sense. Now, I want to go back to another point that you made, and I love that you brought it up. And I want to talk about Carter Hart. We don't have to talk about this Hockey Canada thing. I'm not going to. Neither one of us, I think, want to dig into that whole topic. But I do want to talk about Carter Hart in general. A lot of people, I guess, kind of what's happening there. But what I think is even worse than the Hockey Canada is the Flyers go out and they sign Samuel Ersson, a guy they've been developing for 5 years, a guy who showed up really nicely in the NHL. You obviously would give him a contract. So, he gets a contract. It means Carter Hart's gone. The Flyers take on a bad contract in Pettersson. It means Carter Hart's gone. It just seems like everybody's trying to almost create this narrative. Like, for sure he's gone. He's already gone. And we already have these two guys. But like you said, his age is actually kind of perfect for where they are. It's not bad. It's actually great. And the idea of having somebody like Ersson and Kolosov behind Hart, that's the best goaltender situation that this organization has had in all of the time I've been watching the Flyers. To have youth in a position where you're rebuilding and to have, several potential starters within there. How do you view this Carter Hart situation?
Well, you forgot also to mention the uproar when they had 2 picks relatively high that were goalies in the draft.
Yes, that is.
Those guys aren't going to be here. They'll be here after the rebuild. They'll be here in 7 years. The way it takes goalies, but people still, that was a sign. And what's that about? They're adding a lot of depth in that position for sure. Kolosov is certainly somebody worth watching, and Ersson was a revelation last year, but a very small sample size. So. Sure. Nothing proven, and obviously they pick up a veteran goalie, but he's really a question mark. So there's nothing definite, but they had to get some depth. They didn't have bodies, to be honest with you, for a while to really even you like to have 2 in the AHL and 1 in the ECHL. That's really what most teams have, and the Flyers weren't really able to do that. So now they can, and Sandstrom still there as well. So I mean, it's an interesting situation for Carter Hart. Yeah, he's 25. Goalies we know mature later. So the same timeline we have for some of these other players doesn't exist for Carter. He could still be an all-star caliber player 8-9 years from now in his early 30s. So for those who say, and I've read it a lot from people I really respect, that he doesn't really fit the timeline of the rebuild, that scares me. I might not even be on this earth if this, these guys have their way with that rebuild. I mean, how long is it going to take? It's just not going to take. I just don't see it being that long. Now, Keith Jones and Danny Briere, especially Jonesy, have said that a lot about, this isn't going to happen overnight. But I understand that. It's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to be this year. I don't expect a parade down Broad Street this year. But I do expect, in fact, you wouldn't have John Tortorella as your coach if you didn't expect a competitive team this year. And that's just competing within games. And then if you're talking about being competitive within a playoff scenario, well, I just told you, with all those things that could happen, it certainly would be a welcome break from the recent past of not being barraged by injuries. But if they're relatively healthy, I think this team can compete for a playoff spot. And to me, That's all you can ask right now. They're a young team. They're not going out for free agents. And with all these young players and a couple of veterans sprinkled in, they might compete for a playoff spot. That would be pretty good first year. And Carter Hart will be 26 next year. They should absolutely be contending, if not in the playoffs next year, if you ask me. After all, Owen Tippett and Noah Cates are 24. I mean, the same timeline holds for them, if not more, than it does for Carter Hart. So if you're talking about Carter Hart not being around for the rebuild, you might as well say the same about Owen Tippett and Noah Cates. So that whole narrative doesn't fly with me. It's the team will be good before those guys are old, or else I'm not going to be here. I'll tell you that much. It's just not a 6 or 7 year rebuild. It's not like it was in sports way back when, first of all. Secondly, as you alluded to in hockey, I can point out way more rebuilds where teams went down to the bottom that didn't work than did. The Buffalo Sabres have been in rebuild for over a decade. How's that gone? They're finally in their 11 straight years, 12 straight years out of the playoffs. They're finally maybe going to make the playoffs this year. It's not even a definite. That's a long time. All those first round picks they've had. Edmonton, they had 3 first overall picks in a 5 or 6 year stretch. That was before they got McDavid. Didn't do anything with that. Got McDavid. Haven't been to the Stanley Cup Finals with the best player of his generation, apparently. That's what everybody tells me. So, and maybe the 3rd or 4th best player of his generation in Draisaitl. They still haven't even made it out of the conference finals and have only been to one conference final in 8 years now for Connor McDavid, 8 or 9. Yeah, he's coming into his 9th year, I believe. So, don't tell me that. These rebuilds, basketball is the one sport. NBA, you can do it, but the Sixers tried, and how's that gone?
You can do it because it's only a team of 5.
Yeah, I mean, so there's no guarantees there. You're going to need some breaks. You're going to need smart decisions. But I think most importantly, and this is where I have complete confidence in this management team, you have to have a plan and stick to it. And I think they're going to do that. And you're going to have to adjust. Like I said, you don't know how this year's going to go. If it really goes south, they're going to be trading some, Scott Lawton probably, and Travis Konecny will be out there as trade rumors, and justifiably so if this team is, nowhere near contention. But if this team is improved and they're right there, I don't know as if they would move them. So, but I have trust in these guys to know whether that's the right move or not. I mean, if you get a first round pick for Scott Lawton at the deadline and you're 5 or 6 points out of a playoff spot and somebody offers you a first round pick, you probably take it. And I'm as big a Scott Lawton fan as anybody. I love the guy. He's so important in the room, and he's a Swiss Army knife player and all that. But a first round pick at this stage of his career, to get a first round pick for Scott Lawton, you might take that. I have trust in Danny and Jonesy to know whether or not to go for the move that's going to be a future move or go for a move that might be more of a present move. You're going to see more future moves, I think, in the near future. But as the team gets better, that kind of pivots, and I have full confidence they'll know when to make that pivot.
Yeah, and I love what you said there about how everybody, kind of the structure of the team. Ironically, the team that no one saw coming, the Vegas Golden Knights, a band of misfits that started, goes to the finals. And I actually remember, if you remember the World Hockey Tournament, I forget the exact name, the one that the NHL set up, where they had like that Team Europe, where they kind of mixed all the players together. That was the least interesting of the teams, and they, were like the most competitive in the end. And they were just a band of kind of veterans, where I really think what it's about is, one, you need a full good team. I hate all this recipes of, you can do it with this, you can do it with that. You just need a great team. You need a great defense. You need great offense. You need great goaltending. All the teams that win, they have everything. That's what it is. They're all good. They all hit a bare minimum of good, right? Good to amazing. So I kind of look at this as, if I look at the Flyers right now, the offense has really, and I've heard Bill Meltzer say this quite a bit, the offense has a lot of really nice pieces. You mentioned a lot of them already. Frost obviously being out there as well. And the and the goaltending, obviously we talked about, but the defense itself, that has a lot more question marks. With somebody like Travis Sanheim and Cam York, they're kind of the cornerstones of this defense right now, which is kind of weird to say. I do have really high hopes for Cam York still, and I do see more in Travis Sanheim. But how do you see this defense kind of playing out? And do you see the Flyers maybe going for a big impact move at some point along the road, try to bring in a vet? Maybe it's not this year, maybe not even next year, but maybe the following year. Maybe it's a veteran they bring in if they don't manage to grab one of these, top young defensemen through the draft over the next year or two.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt a puck moving stud number one defenseman is important. I would say when you look at Vegas, they were more of a really good group of defensemen.
Yeah.
There are those who could argue Pietrangelo, but I mean, some think he's a Hall of Famer. So I think he's a very good defenseman. I don't think he's elite like Cale Makar, elite. Not really anybody's that, but
No.
I think in his St. Louis years maybe, but at this stage of his career, I watched a lot of Vegas. He had some really bad games, but and then they had some guys, but I don't think they have that sure shot number one first ballot Hall of Fame defenseman back there. But they have a lot of depth and size, right, in their defense. The Flyers they lose Provorov, and the biggest thing that Provorov gave the Flyers was minutes. He played a lot. He played every game, never missed a game because of injury. Just the COVID got him for a couple of games, but he never missed a game due to injury. And the minutes he plays, that's incredible. So, tip of the helmet, as Eddie Olczyk would say, to Provy for that, because he was a durable son of a gun and always showed up to play. But he's not a number one. He just wasn't. I mean, in his best year, I would say he was a tad below a number one. And in his years where he wasn't there, he wasn't close. So you're losing minutes, yes. But who's to say those minutes can't be eaten up without any kind of fall off? Maybe even improved upon. A lot of that's going to be Cam York. I think he's going to get a chance to do it. He doesn't have the size of Provy, the bulk, let's say, but he probably has better power play skill than Provy to be a number one defenseman. Not the same defensive skill as Provorov. That's where maybe you're going to rely on a Ristolainen or somebody else to be in the mix as a guy that's out there when you're up a goal. But we'll see. I'm not. Everyone's saying, you lost your number one defenseman, but I'm not sure he was a number one defenseman. So in fact, I don't think he was. I think he's a good player. I'm not bashing Provy because he's gone. I hate when people do that. As I said, he was a warrior. He showed up all the time and did what he could. But I don't think, and he didn't get many chances this year, but the chances he had in the power play in his career, he never took that and really ran with it. Did score a bunch of goals one year, but never to me looked like that guy who was directing a power play, because he looked like he just took too long to make decisions and things like that. Defensively, pretty good as a shutdown guy when he was on, prone to giveaways. If you just throw it all into a mix, I don't think he's a number one. I think he might be a number two, a decent number two defenseman. So you're going to miss that for sure, and you have to replace those minutes, but it's not irreplaceable. So if we can get past that, because a lot of people just throw that around, how are they going to replace the Provorov minutes? So then it's York, it's Ristolainen, it's Sanheim, and it's who else is going to be in that top four? Are they going to have a Mark Stahl move up there just to play with York? Are they going to have a Walker? Is he going to be an improved player because he's second year off a knee injury? And then there's young guys. Ronnie Adder, where is he gonna fit in? They gave him a two-way this year, which indicates they might think more minor league time, and then a one-way next year. There's Jinning, there's Zamula. They're not number ones, but where are they going to fit into the whole program? So, and then there's the wild card. There's Emil Andre, who, I just love the kid. So we'll see where he fits in. I don't want to, I rail on people who jump on prospects and then, overpromise them. So I already have. I've said he's Kimmo Timonen, and if he's Kimmo Timonen, the Flyer defense is suddenly fine, right?
Right, yeah.
But he's very small. He's smaller than Kimmo, although he's got that similar stockiness and certainly has the willingness to use his body. But his creativity, his ability to get the shot through, his just general presence on the ice, love it. And I know if he plays like I expect he will in training camp, it's going to be really tough for them to send him down. But if he does stick, I'm not sure where. So you're right. Defense is a complete, at this point, question mark. Not all negative question mark. Andre's certainly not a negative. But where does everybody fit in? Where do they slot in? They got these veterans. They got to play, right? So, but does Mark Stahl or Sean Walker, do they get in the way of a young player? If a young player? No. I don't think, given what the mission is for this team and what the statement is and what their plan is, I don't think they let a veteran get in the way of a young player. So it'll be interesting to see how that all pans out. And by the way, there's Nick Seeler, who just played great hockey last year. So, I mean, there's a whole bunch of defensemen. Where they're all going to play, I'm probably forgetting one, to be honest with you.
Victor Mete, he's been mixed in.
Yeah, Mete is a veteran guy that could be used anywhere. But so you're looking at Sanheim, Ristolainen, York, and in the top four, right? And then your bottom two, it could be anybody, literally. I mean, I don't know how you scratch Nick Seeler. I mean, he was so good last year. I mean, everyone who played with him played better. As a bottom pair defenseman, I think he's proven he's an NHL player, right? And then, Stahl, do you sign him to scratch him? Or Walker, does he sit? Does Ronnie Adder not get a chance? Zamulas can't be sent down. Does he play no matter what? Jinning, talk to the people with the Phantoms. They love him. So a lot of numbers there, but not that stud, at least at this point. There's a couple guys on there that could become studs, though. And if you have that possibility, I mean, some people still hold out for Travis Sanheim. I mean, I was really disappointed in his season because the second half of the season before, that was the Sanheim we've been waiting for. I'm not sure it was even the second half, but the last third of the season, whatever it was, he really played well. And then he seemed to have a little trouble adjusting to Torts adjusting to him, and it really got off to a bad start. He had a good month. What was it, December last year?
Yeah.
November, December. And we thought, okay, he's gotten used to Torts. They're going to roll. And then he just disappeared. So, if Travis Sanheim suddenly, because Provorov's not here and he gets more responsibility or something, becomes the Travis Sanheim we've seen glimpses of, then he is a guy that's an absolute top four defenseman and maybe even a top pair defenseman. So there's some possibilities there. It's not all hope is lost, but if none of these things pan out, they are going to have to either go out and get one as they get further on in the rebuild, or hope that one of their draft picks down the line turns into that stud defenseman. I don't think Oliver Bonk's cut in that mold. I think he's more of a top four guy that's going to be a solid player, but there could be somebody that comes along, or maybe their draft pick. They have 2 first-round picks next year. Maybe that's when they target a defenseman that has the potential to be that stud. But you're going to have close to that. To win. I know, as you say, you don't agree with these formulas. I'm kind of with you on that. But because the formula changes every year. It went to you got to have a franchise goalie. And Vasilevsky won all his cups, right? Now Aiden Hill wins the Stanley Cup. Don't need a franchise goalie anymore. People are, you don't need a franchise goalie. Well, and then for a while it was speed. It's all about speed. And then the Caps won and the Blues won, kind of with grit.
Exactly.
And and then Tampa won. It's back to you need speed and super skill. And then last year Vegas won more with bulk and grit, I think, than with
you need to compensate. That's how I kind of. You need to compensate. If speed is your weapon, then great. Then you have speed, but then you have to load up in other areas. Like everything.
More than one way to skin a cat. Absolutely.
Right, you have to just load up, right? Like if I don't have a true number one defenseman, right, then I need a series of good defensemen. That means I need more. If I'm the Flyers back in the day, sure. If I have Pronger, Timonen, and Coburn in my top 3, I can utilize 4 defensemen to make it to the finals. With Matt Carl, doesn't matter who my bottom pairing defensemen are. But if I don't have that, then I need 2 better bottom pairing defensemen. If I don't have, and this is the argument for keeping Hart, which I think people are like, well, they're not going to be good and all that. They don't have a number one defenseman. It's like, well, then even more that you need a great goalie, because if you don't have a number one defenseman, then compensate by having better goaltending. Have better centermen. Down the middle. It's kind of find out how you can compensate for your weaknesses. It doesn't have to be a number one defenseman. It can be stretched out through multiple players. Like Vegas, they didn't win by having the best center in the league, but they did have Jack Eichel, right? They had a number one center, even though he was recovering. They had top players to play against the team's best players. They didn't have to be the best players in the league. They had to be really good at what they do. And that's how the Flyers made it.
Aiden Hill isn't considered an elite goalie, but he played like an elite goalie. So
Michael Leighton.
People say that about the Flyers a lot. I've never had that goalie to win in the playoffs. Robert Esch was tremendous one playoff year. Brian Boucher had a couple of really good playoff runs where they played like elite goalies. Were they throughout the entirety of their careers? Maybe not, but they were in their specific time frames. Roman Cechmanek, for crying out loud, had a great, even though they didn't score any goals for him. Maybe. So, that again, the narrative has kind of changed when Vasilevsky was winning. Oh, we got to have that guy. Well, the last two Stanley Cup winning goalies have been named Kemper and Hill. Darcy Kemper's kind of underrated, but I still wouldn't consider him. He's not going to be a Hall of Fame goalie, for instance. Aiden Hill's got a nice contract, but I don't think he's going to be a Hall of Fame goalie. So now all of a sudden, it's not quite like running backs in the NFL, but all of a sudden there's a kind of a devalue on that number one goalie thing going on out there. But you still have to have it. You have to have great goaltending, whether it's an elite goalie
a defense
or a goalie
like Colorado.
Like
well, I'm sorry to cut you off, but if you have a defense like Colorado, you can win with Kemper.
Yeah. Well, Kemper really for a long time had the best save percentage in the league over like a 7-year straight. He's a pretty underrated goalie, but it's. Yeah, I mean, you have Cale Makar out there, and they had Byron was playing, and who am I forgetting? I'm forgetting the guy they got from the Islanders.
Taves.
Yeah,
Devin Taves. So,
yeah, I mean, they have a great
Eric
defense.
Johnson obviously was there.
Yeah. So I mean, they're you're right. There's different. The chemistry of every team is going to be different. It's a copycat league, but you can't copy every team exactly. My hope for the defense for the Flyers this year is that a couple of the young guys I've mentioned step forward. And if Mark Stahl is playing a big role late in the year, it's just because of what he did for Matador down in Florida, where he became, and I covered that series for TNT, Paul Maurice could not have raved enough about what Stahl meant to the development of his partner during the course of the year into an all-star defenseman after being basically a journeyman, even though he had high hopes at the beginning of his career. So Mark Stahl, if he's having that influence on a Cam York or something, and he's playing fine, but I'd much rather see a young guy taking the minutes at the end because he's playing well, and they have a bunch of them. So we'll see.
Yeah, no, I like that. So if I had to, so I'll give you two questions here. Who are you personally most excited about going into camp that can make the team? And the other one, who is your dark horse for making the team? And maybe you answered this one already, but you obviously can repeat that because I think.
Yeah, well, Andre's definitely I'm most excited to see.
Okay.
Because I've seen a couple of his AHL games and then development camp. Development camp, he was, head and shoulders above players. So
look like a pro.
Much into that, but I mean, you talk to Ian LePerrier, you talk to the people who had him for the time he was down with the Phantoms, and I mean, they rave about him. And you read the scouting reports on him over in Sweden, and they rave about him. So I'm really excited about him. So yes, Tyson Forster, a very close second though, because Tyson Forster had a great run, and I think has the makings of one of those players who's better at the NHL level than he is at the AHL level, better with better players around him, better in structure. If he plays the way he did when he was here last year, he's a 25-30 goal scorer next year.
Yeah.
He scored. How many did he score in the time he was here? I mean, absolutely. I mean, he's got an unbelievable shot, but what impressed me more about him was his all-around game. So he's a close second in that. Dark horse, Denoye, I think will be my dark horse because I really like him a lot, and he could fit into that fourth line center spot really well. And he's one of those guys that he could be your fourth line center if somebody goes down on one of the top two lines, injury or whatever, or somebody's not playing well, and he can go up there and for a short term play on a top two line too. He's got some skills. So, but again, hockey IQ off the charts. So I say he'd be my dark horse. I'm not sure he's a dark horse because John Tortorella pretty much said last year he loved him, but a guy let's put it this way, a guy kind of under the radar because people aren't really talking too much about him, but I think he has a legitimate shot to make the team. Now, the acquisitions of Hathaway and Paling make that more questionable So, I mean, I would not want to see young guys not here because of Ryan Poehling. You know, I like Ryan Poehling. He's still young too, but you know, if it's Denoye or Poehling, it might end up being Poehling because Denoye has options, right, or whatever. He can be sent down, I think. But
Contract, yeah.
yeah, but I always where the Flyers are now. I want to see the young guys, and I don't ever hide that. But Paling's young enough you can still consider him a guy that if he has a great year this year, they can re-sign him and he could be part of the future. So whereas Hathaway's absolutely a veteran pickup, Stahl absolutely a veteran pickup. They're not part, especially Stahl, not part of the future, but they're here to help the culture now and to help the young players develop, especially Stahl with one of the young defensemen.
So I guess I'm going to ask you one more question here on the team, and then I want to move into a couple prospect stuff, and we'll end after that. I want to talk again, not just about Sean Couturier, but I consistently hear this idea that the Flyers don't have a top line. This is something that's repeated on the internet a lot. Again, I don't agree with any of that stuff as well. Healthy, I think, is part of that conversation. Not healthy, totally understand. But if you look at the Flyers on paper and you look at a line, and again, I'm just going to throw out a combination Couturier, Travis Konechny, and throw in a various group of names, right? Tippett, Atkinson, Farabee, throw in any of the guys, maybe even Scott Lawton on that top line. How do you look at that top line? And do you think that that is a real NHL top line? I believe it is. And do you see them being able to actually compete? And do you think TK in combination with somebody like Sean Couturier can exceed what he did last year, or at least very least match it and go on that 40-goal pace again?
I think so. Your first question, if again, it's all based on Couturier's health. If Couturier is healthy, it is 85 to 90% of Sean Couturier. Couturier, Konechny, Tippett is absolutely a top line. I mean, Konechny was an all-star. I know Kevin Hayes was the rep, but Konechny was the Flyers all-star last year and was very deserving of being an all-star. I mean, if he didn't miss the time that he had, the minor injuries he had, he would have, 40 goals, like you say. So absolutely, he's an all-star caliber player. Couturier is an all-star caliber player. If it's 90% Couturier, maybe he's a tad below all-star, but pretty close. And then Owen Tippett's an emerging young player who to me looks like a 30 to 35 goal scorer. If you have the offense that Konechny and Tippett can bring, and you put the two-way ability of Couturier in there, it's a matter of whether it works from a chemistry standpoint. I can't guarantee that. But from just a talent standpoint, is it a number one line? Absolutely, it's a number one line. And then you're still talking about, Farabee and some other like Atkinson, some guys in the second line. You have a second line that's very solidly from a talent standpoint, a second line, depending on your center. Now, if Kate's going to be a checking player completely, I don't want them to pigeonhole him into that because I do think there is some offensive upside there. Maybe you put Frost in there. And there's another player we really have to watch this year. His numbers were better. He absolutely improved. Seemed like he and Torts came to some kind of agreement as the year went along. And but he's got to keep going. He's not there yet. So he's got to keep developing to be a number 2 center in the NHL. But, if it's Cates or Frost, we see Scott Lawton can fit in anywhere up and down the lineup. Hathaway can play probably as high as the third line. Wade Allison, where does he go? Forster, if Tyson Forster plays the way he played last year, he's a top 9 forward for sure. So I'm forgetting somebody, but there's a whole group of players that clearly have talent to be in the top 6, top 9 on an NHL team. But people are in general, fans, some media people who don't look deeply at a team, just look at the record. Yeah. See, they haven't made the playoffs the last 3 years. Weren't in the running for the playoffs the last 3 years. So there's not many changes that have been made. They've been, kind of small changes. So they're going to stink again. But you have to look at the coach is not new anymore. B, Couturier, Atkinson. C, young players getting better. So there's 3 factors there that should make them better this year. Overall health, hopefully, that's a big question mark. But the other three, to me, are pretty constant as long as Couturier and Atkinson do, and that's part of the staying healthy thing. But as long as they are part of it, the young players, most of them, not all of them, but most of them should get better. And you add that in, and then you add in maybe a Forster, maybe an Andre, add some more young talent. I'm excited. So if the haters aren't, the haters aren't, but they'll jump aboard if they start winning. And that's really what it is. It's it's a results oriented business. I would not have it any other way. But the way it is here in Philly, where people react with every game like it's
right.
Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Finals, they do it with the Phillies in the 162 game season. So they do it with the Flyers 82, and they certainly do it with the Eagles in what now a 17 game season. But it's a football mentality, but I like it, and we live and die with it. I'd rather have it that way than not anybody caring at all. Right, but if they start winning, a lot more people will care. And that's going to happen eventually. I'm not saying again they're going to compete for the Stanley Cup this year or next, but I think they're going to be competitive. And I think if all the stuff we've talked about happens, they're going to be competitive even in a playoff contention kind of scenario. But again, for that to happen, and I very honest about this, there's a lot of things that have to go right, and some things may go wrong. Maybe Owen Tippett doesn't take another step. Maybe he takes a step back. Maybe Farabee doesn't get better with the strength in a full season of training. A logic would tell you that Tippett will probably be the Tippett we saw over the second 2/3 of the year because his confidence clicked in. He should still have his confidence, so he should be there or better. Logic would tell you Farabee should be better because he's going to be stronger and have that whole good off season of workouts in. But hockey's not a logical sport. Sometimes it goes the other way, and if enough things go the other way, they'll not be in contention. And I have confidence in management to then make the moves at the deadline to keep building for the future.
So let me ask you something. As we're thinking something out loud, something I've obviously been growing up watching the Flyers forever, and one thing that I'm huge on. You brought up that these are young guys that are improving. I truly believe in that. Like when I see a 23-year-old, 24-year-old, I say, this is a young player. He's going to get better. Most great players don't break out till they're 26. That's the average. People kind of look at these outliers at the top, the guys who walk in, they're good by 21, they have no problems. But that's even the majority of the best players in the league are not like that. It took them time to get there. And I feel like there's a lot of terminology, a lot of these sayings that go around. One of them being, this is a young man's game. I don't really believe that. I think if it was a young man's game, the young man would have the advantage. I think the reason that there are more young players in the league is because of the salary cap. Being young is not an advantage in hockey. As you can see by the Stanley Cup winners, it's like they're not really young. It's like just kind of a new veteran age, which is maybe a year younger than what it used to be, where it used to be maybe 31. Now it's 29. And I kind of look at that. Do you think that we're kind of running into that problem with the Flyers right now, where you see guys like Farabee, Frost, Tippett, York, all these guys are 21 to 24. This is the infancy of their career where they're really just entering their prime, which probably hits, varying depending on your position, around 24 to 26, depending on your position. And they're just entering it. So like they should be expecting to get better, but a lot of people don't feel that way. Do you think that's kind of something that's newly developed, or maybe that's always been there? But I feel like it's a little counteractive because that's what I'm hoping on. And that's what I would assume the Flyers would think is we made an investment in these young guys. They will improve. They can improve in their 20s, their early 20s. This is the time to do it. Do you think that that's the case?
I think the league has gotten a little younger. You may be right. It might be because of the salary cap, but I'm really very aggressive in my charting of ages. And as I've done it, it's been going down. I mean, there's no doubt. I mean, the average age used to be around 30, to be honest with you, way back. And it's down in the 27 range now, 27, 26. But you're right. It might be the salary cap. It might have nothing to do with the fact that these guys are better at younger ages. Although I would argue with the fighting dropping off and
the hooking,
the college hockey and junior hockey looks more and more like the NHL not that caliber, but just the
you're right.
style.
Totally.
So maybe they don't have as much of an adjustment period. But you're still so right. These play, even Connor McDavid. I mean, remember, Connor McDavid's starting here. he has a talent level. So, but he is gone. If you watch the jump in his game, not his offense. He's always had a great offensive game, but he's become a much better two-way player. He's still got a long way to go. He's not Sidney Crosby. He's not Patrice Bergeron, right. But he's at least competent defensively now. And, he still is great offensively, and he's actually added a shot now, which wasn't a big, he used to get a ton of breakaways and not score. Now, good luck stopping him. So he's even hit a new level once he got to like 24, 25. He's going to be 26. He's middle-aged, by NHL standards for the guys that are at the top level that come in at, 19, 20. But you're right. For the normal mortal, you're going to see the jump at 24, 25, 26. Connor did too, but he was already here, so he jumped up here.
So you don't notice 120 points to 150.
Yeah.
Right.
But his overall game is much better, and the will in his game has improved. Yeah. He used to just be a talented player to me. I think one of the biggest misnomers for the first 4 or 5 years of his career was that, Edmonton just didn't give him players. Well, if you watch their playoff failures, he had a lot to do with it. He made some terrible mistakes with the puck, turnovers, wasn't good defensively. And then they got swept into the bubble. And, that was devastating. Started to hear negative Connor talk, even in Edmonton for the first time. He came back, not this past season, but the season before that, with a new edge. And that's what happens. You mature, and he's got that now. And I think it's only a matter of time before they win a cup. But, because he's got a great player. He's got more than one great player now. They've surrounded him with plenty of talent. It's the goaltending. Okay, yeah, they might need to still work on that. But you don't need that elite goalie anymore.
You can try to outscore the opposition, right?
And I mean, every year they're in the top 3 or 4 among the favorites in Vegas to win the cup, right? But they haven't even got to the finals. But his game is definitely improved. So to your point, absolutely, it's not. Cale Makar probably is the bigger outlier because he stepped into the playoffs in his very first day, and he was already elite.
Insane.
Yeah, and he's still insane. And I don't know if he's getting better because he was so good to begin with, right?
Yeah.
But those are complete outliers. Those are not those are once in a generation kind of players. So when you're talking about mere mortals, it takes a while. And there's still different guys have different things to live with. Wade Allison has to prove he can stay healthy. Cam York has to prove he can play both ends of the ice, play major minutes. Joel Farabee has to prove he can come back from the surgery. They all have different things to prove. Tippett has to show that was legitimate last year, that he did take that step. Even Travis Konechny has to show that he has taken that next step. So there's always something to prove for these guys. And, but they haven't done it yet. So for the fans, they're probably like, I don't believe it until I see it. I can understand that.
Agreed.
But for people who know these players and know scouts and coaches and GMs, you kind of picture where they're headed. You see the trajectory of their careers. And if you see that, it's pretty exciting because they have a lot of players who should be on the up now. As you know, not all of them do that. Some drop off or just level off and get moved or whatever. But the Flyers have enough young players that if, 2/3 of them continue to improve, or at half to 2/3, they're going to have a lot of good young players. And just think of the excitement, Yariv, if you think about they have a decent competitive season this year. Maybe you don't even make the playoffs, but they compete and are right there. And then you've got Cutter Gauthier coming. And then a couple of years down the road, you've got this other guy coming, Mishkov. All of a sudden, and you got 2 first-round picks next year, all of a sudden, things are looking pretty good. So it's really not that far off. But for a lot of fans, they're just not going to see that until they start actually winning games on the ice. So it's going to take a while for them to jump in. There are some fans who are already aboard. They're aboard with the rebuild and they're ready and they're excited. There are others who are like, show me. And
Sure.
I give that to them. This is a
They should be.
results-oriented business. You have to show them. But I think showing them this year isn't winning the Stanley Cup. That's unrealistic. I was asked the other day, are you afraid of a disappointing season this year? And I said, depends on what your expectations are. Yeah, my expectations are for the team to play hard, which they did last year. So I don't see why that wouldn't happen. To be in games, which they were last year. I mean, 87% of the games, they were at worst down a goal in the third period, something like that. It was high percentage. They were in almost all their game. But to win a couple more of those, win some more of those overtime games, most importantly, to see some of these young players take the next step. And if enough of the young players take a next step, they're going to be better. I mean, that's just the way it works. They're going to need Carter Hart to be Carter Hart and to be here. They're going to need Sean Couturier and Cam Atkinson to come back and contribute to a relatively large level. If those happen, and then again, the young players take the next step, they will contend. I mean, they have to. I mean, last year, as bad as things seem to get, you flip their overtime record, they're in playoff contention. So,
those injuries were insane.
Could have gone either way, right? And those games, it could have gone either way. And so they weren't even that far off last year. I mean, they weren't playoff contenders, don't get me wrong, but they weren't that far off. They were close in games. They didn't have that player to score that big goal, and they yet? I don't know, but we're going to see. And some of these young guys might develop into that. Owen Tippett might be that guy. Morgan Frost may be that guy. Cam York might be the guy that's setting those guys up to be that guy. Joel Farabee might be that guy. Tyson Forster may be that guy. There are possibilities. And at this point, when you're in a developing stage and in a rebuild, everyone loves the word. Well, it's all about having hope and seeing that some of these players get better. And so that's my expectation for the season. So if all these young guys, and let's say 80% of them just have terrible years, that would be a disappointing year to me. But I don't think that's going to happen.
You know how I think it would be reflected, though I don't see this happening either, is if John Tortorella gets fired. I think that's a reflection of a disappointment. It's like, what happened? We were on the right track. We're here to develop the players. He's the right man to do it. And if for some reason he's not here, which again, I do not anticipate at all, that would be, hey, things are not going the way we thought they were going. But I don't anticipate that at all. In fact, let me I'm kind of rely on him.
Knowing Keith Jones and hearing Keith Jones talk about John Tortorella last year when he was broadcaster Keith Jones, he loves him. So
I love him. So
and Danny, I the talks I've had with Danny, which haven't been extensive by any stretch, but I think Danny really likes. So I think they're all on board now.
Yeah,
Torch is a volatile fellow. So if something weird happens where he, who knows what it would be, maybe that scenario develops, but very, very small percent. There's more of a chance of him just getting fed up and walking away, I think, than him getting fired. But I don't see it. I think he's on board.
I agree.
The misnomer is that he can't work with young players. Go ask.
I think that's
Zach
his favorite
Werenski.
part.
Yeah, go ask Zach Werenski. Zach Werenski talked to Tim Saunders, and unfortunately, it was the day that night playing against us where he got hurt and was out for the rest of the year. But before that game, we asked him about Torts, and he said it was rough early on. He was benching me and all over me, and I didn't like it. We didn't like each other. And he says, but I weathered it, and he was the best thing that could happen in my career. I mean, he will rave about him. So Cam York could be in those very same shoes. Even Travis Sanheim, not a young player, but a guy who obviously had some turbulence with him last year. Torts can get you back. It's tough love at its toughest.
That's what this team needs.
I mean, so I think he's going to be here. I don't agree with the theory that he can't develop young players. I think he absolutely can. And he has a good coaching staff to help him too. So that narrative, I don't buy.
I think it's his specialty. I think actually quite the opposite. I think this tough love is exactly the way you treat athletes in development. I think everything about his personality, even the way he talks about his son being a leader of men, I don't notice that by accident. He uses that word specifically. Like, this is a guy who spends all day thinking about leadership and motivation. That's the type of guy you want to instill in young players. And even if it's harsh, a lot of times you need that as long as it's coming from that caring place and not that harsh, I just want to win place, right? And nobody gets the sense from Tortorella that it's not genuine and for the better interest of everyone involved. He doesn't seem like the type of guy who's there. And, I don't know Babcock, but that one story, which again, I don't really even hate it that much, but that one story about Marner and all that kind of playing these games, it seems like he got a little bit too into himself there, about just winning and into himself, where I don't think Torts is like that. I think Torts's games are they're not games. They're very blunt and in person. He has like this father mentality, which I think that's exactly what these young guys need, to be honest.
Torts is very honest. I mean, he just tells you what he feels. I think he does it in a professional way. I think his press conferences give people probably an impression of him that I can't say isn't him, because he has to own up to what he says in the press conferences. But he's tough on media people in the press conferences, I guess. When there's a bad question, he calls you out on it. Well, when you make a bad play as a player, he calls you out on it. But he doesn't hold the grudge.
Right.
He doesn't. His situation with Kevin Hayes last year was not that he didn't like Kevin. If he said it once, he said it 1,000 times. He's a great guy. I really like Kevin Hayes. He just knew that his playing style wasn't changing enough to be even close to being part of John Tortorella's system. So it wasn't like he got mad at Kevin Hayes in game 20 and that was it. He lost him. Mm-hmm. He kept playing him, wanted to see him, get with the program, tried him in another position. It just wasn't going to happen. So he was absolutely going to be part of the subtraction. Tony DeAngelo, I'm not sure what happened there at the end of the year, but he was going to be part of the subtraction. I think Ivan Provorov, there's contractual issues there, but with Provorov, it was more, I don't think he wanted to play in Torts' system. So, and I don't think Provy was happy with much in Philly anymore. The way everything had gone. So more subtraction. So when people are looking, that might be another reason why people are thinking 5-6 years down the road, they traded Hayes, they traded Provorov, they traded DeAngelo, they let James Van Riemsdyk go. These are all, veteran players. Well, Van Riemsdyk obviously was salary cap, and you got to take that money and put it somewhere else. The other three were subtraction because they weren't going to play in John Tortorella's culture and his system. That's the way I see it, more than having to do with throwing away wins next year. It was guys that might work. Tony DeAngelo may work very well back in Carolina. Kevin Hayes may thrive. Who knows? He could thrive where and Provy in Columbus could. St. Louis for Hayes is an interesting place. So, I mean, they could all do well. It's just I don't think they're going to do well here with Torts. So I think the subtraction was part of the main reason for those moves. Oh, by the way, did it help them from a salary cap standpoint? A little. I mean, they only saved half on Hayes, and they really didn't save much on Tony. It's more about subtraction because of what they're building here, and they didn't think those guys were going to be part of that culture, and not because they're bad guys, just because they didn't fit.
Happens all the time.
Yeah. So it's careful. I think it's very important to realize that those moves weren't necessarily made. Some people, if you just look at it on the surface, it's like, oh, they're trading away all their players that are talented. They're trying to tank. No, it's not a tank.
No, I agree with that. I don't think they've even behaved that way, but I totally agree with that assessment. So let's get into this final topic. And, you mentioned them a little bit already. But the last time I really remember an era like this, I guess you can compare Provorov, TK, even though they're relatively young. But, it was really Richards Carter was kind of this monumental change in the draft. The Flyers have probably had maybe the most impactful draft I've seen probably in my life, really watching the Flyers, because I kind of missed the Eric Lindros draft. But, the Flyers have taken Matvei Michkov, a potential generational talent. Again, we don't want to label him that, it's all potential, but definitely an all-star talent. And then Cutter Gauthier, again, a guy, I don't know if he's going to be generational like that, but definitely top-line player potential in the NHL. These guys both look sick. Cutter we're going to have very soon, and he, He looks like a new type of player that the Flyers really have not had in quite a long time. And then Matvei Michkov looks like something just uniquely special, and now is already being tested as a centerman, which is actually something we brought up on this podcast before they did it in the KHL. Just the ability to develop a center, right? Why, if you're going to do it with Cutter, why not try with the most talented guy? But what do you feel when you see these guys here? Does it reminisce those, some of those times of those big players? And how are you feeling about the Cutter, Gauthier, Michkov? And I do want to comment. I did hear a comment by Grant McCagg, and I want to see what your thoughts on saying that Michkov has bust potential, which I think sounds crazy to me. But just watching
everybody has bust potential.
It's
Connor Bedard might be too small. Who knows?
Right. Yeah.
I mean, seriously, I bust potential. Most of that's based upon, they say there's a little sign of his attitude, but from what I saw of his attitude, it was great. And he's in Russia. It's tough to get a real handle on that kind of stuff.
Sure.
But it was a absolute must. If you wanted any proof that what Jonesy and Danny are doing is about the future, that was it, because they had a guy sitting there staring at them that's a true Flyer in Ryan Leonard. He is a absolute Flyer, right? Mm-hmm. Gritty, talented. If they were going to stick to the way it's been, they would have picked him. No, they needed to swing for the fence, and they did. Now, when you swing for the fence, you can swing and miss. There's a higher chance of that than if you're trying to bunt. But they needed to do that. You need elite talent somewhere on your team to win the Stanley Cup, most likely. I mean, there have probably been a couple teams that have won the cup without elite talent, but not many lately. So, if even last year, Eichel's elite, right? So they were pretty close to not having elite.
Mark Stone.
Yeah, I mean, he's so banged up. I don't know if he's elite anymore,
injury.
but Pietrangelo was probably close to elite at one point. Is he now? I don't know. But the year before that, there's quite a bit of elite on that team. The year before that, quite a bit of elite on that team too. So you need that elite talent, and he has that. Now, that doesn't mean he's going to be an elite player, but at least there's the potential for that. And for Cutter's getting better. Cutter's going, he's a 5th overall pick that's starting to look more like a top 1 or 2. He's really impressing people.
Mm-hmm.
Question with both will be the position they play. Cutter might just be so good as a winger that they can't put him at center, but they love to have that big center iceman, right? So it'll be interesting. In either case, that's the hope that we talk about. And they have another guy who wasn't a first round pick who I think might be a big part of that future too. And I've talked enough about him tonight. So, it's just, and Cam York is still, the guy was the captain of one of the best world junior teams in history. So, he's still got elite potential too. And Tyson Forster has some pretty interesting stuff. So they have some real prospects that have that, what they've been lacking over the last little while. And some of it's been injury related, but they've been lacking that elite talent. So they almost had to make that pick, I think. Although if they didn't, they could have easily fallen back on the guy that went to the Caps and said, okay, this is a great Flyer. He's orange and black, but they didn't. They went for the big swing on Michkov, and we're going to have 3 years of rumors and rumblings because he's in Russia. I don't care about the 3 years too much. He'll be 21, just about to turn 22, right? When he comes over, if it's the 3 years, that's fine. That's good. He's playing in a league against men, so he's developing anyhow. I just want it to be then. The worries with Russia are the political worries, which the Flyers have no control over that geopolitical world we live in. But I still think it was worth the risk. And it's exciting to have a potential generational play. The last generational, I mean, Carter and Richards were great players, and Provorov and Konechny are very good players, but not generational. I mean, the last one was Lindros, and Lindros was a Hall of Fame player. I don't know as if his career turned out to be generationally better than anybody else. That's to me, I have a very high bar on that. I mean, I may have seen 5 players in my lifetime since in the 30 years I've been here that I would say were generationally good. So, I mean, I think Eric might have fallen a little shy of that, but he was a Hall of Fame player. So, the fact that the Flyers have a potential Hall of Fame player out there, maybe two, maybe three, is exciting. And I can't remember the last time I can say that about the Flyers. So, and on top of that, they have good young players here already, a good solid nucleus of young players. So, to me, I'm excited, and it's going to take a little while to see the W's, I think, maybe, but I don't think they'll be hard to watch. Let's put it that way.
That's a beautiful way to end. All right, this was great. Thank you so much, Jim, for coming on. Anything you want to let people know about? Maybe the courses that you have open or anything that's upcoming?
Still doing the broadcast coaching. Have another month where I can go full bore at it, and then once training camp rolls around, I scale back a little, but I still do it during the season, and it's up on my schedule on my website, jimjacksonbroadcasting.com. So you can check it out there. And again, people lately, the last year or so, it's really fallen back into mainly hockey announcers doing it. I want to stress that I've done all four sports, and I've done roles in all four sports. I've done sideline. I've done talk shows on radio. I've done, obviously, play-by-play. I teach all kinds of sports broadcasting and even news broadcasting. So if you're a sideline reporter, that's what you want to be, or if it's you want to be a podcaster, or you want to just be a talk show host, on a sports radio station, I teach that too. It's not just hockey play-by-play, and it's not just sports play-by-play. So it's sports broadcasting. So go to jimjacksonbroadcasting.com. There's information on it there. If you have any questions, there's an email on my website. You can go there. And I'd love to have you. I have room for a couple more students here before the season starts, and then we'll fit some in during the season, and then get back at it next summer. But it's been really rewarding. I mean, when the Phillies parted ways with me, it was a shock, and certainly financially wasn't very good. But I'm so happy it happened now. I've been able to get into the broadcast coaching. I'm doing a lot of voiceover work. I've done 9 audiobooks this summer. And I love it. It's so much fun. I learn about things, and I love it. I'm an information hound, I'll say, instead of using the other word. And plus I'm getting to golf again, which has its ups and downs. But I'm swimming. I have an in-ground pool we put in 10 years ago that, for the first 7 years, I barely knew it was out there. My wife takes care of it and does a great job, and I barely got in. Now I'm swimming every day. We went on legitimate vacations, went to St. Thomas for 8 days. I mean, it was the old saying, which I used to hate, things happen for a reason, but I've had 3 summers now of really what I should have probably been doing. And I wouldn't have done it because I was in such a rhythm doing both sports. But now, and as I don't think we were on the air yet. Were we on the air when we were talking about I think it might extend how long I do the Flyers, if they're willing to have me, because I get to do a lot of what I would do in retirement for 4 months during the summer. So I'm happy about it, but the broadcast coaching is a major part of that. So if you're interested, go to jimjacksonbroadcasting.com. I
love it. All right. Thank you again, everybody, for listening. We love you guys. Please like, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications. Again, if you give us a rating on Spotify or iTunes, these are also immensely helpful. Make sure to check out the team store as well. And again, Jim, thank you so much. Really appreciate you coming on. Thank you, everybody, for listening. We love you. And remember, always stay gritty.